All right, good morning, guys. Today I'm going to walk you through some of the slides from our legislative branch. So I'm going to share my screen to you, and we are going to go through bicameralism and reapportionment. So the big question is, why do we move to a national legislature? Like, what's the importance there? And if you look at the first two bullets here, national legislature, their primary responsibility is to transform the public will into public policy. So what that means is they have quite possibly the most important job there is as far as the national government goes. They take the will of the people, which is us, and turn it into public policy, which would be laws, regulations, anything like that. So if what we want as a general public is, like, let's look at the state of Michigan here. We want better roads, right? It's the will of the people here in Michigan. We want better roads. It's the job of our legislatures, our representatives from our districts and our senators to find a way to make that happen. As a nation, we want universal health care. If that was the case, then it would be the job of the national legislators, all of our members of Congress, to make that happen. So we move down the line here to why bicameralism. What is bicameralism? Bicameralism means that we have one national legislature that's split into two components. So if you look at the image here, we have the Senate on one side and we have the House on the other. The Senate is our upper house, if you want to call it that. And that's comprised of 100 members, if you remember back to our worksheet from earlier. 2 representatives from each state. So regardless of size of population or size of territory, each state has 2 members. So Montana has a huge territory but small population. They still get 2 senators. Rhode Island, very small territory but a decent sized population. They still have 2 members. We have 2 members here in Michigan as well. The other side, you have the House. The House, we know, is comprised of 430 members, if you go back to our worksheet again. And those 435 members are dispersed based on population. So the more populated the state, the more members of House that they have. The less populated the state, the fewer members of the House they have, and the fewest that a state can have is 1 representative in the House. But why? Why did we choose bicameralism? If we go down to bullet point A here, the biggest reason is the bulk of our founding fathers were from Great Britain, right? Great Britain, their parliament was already split into a bicameral setup. So in Great Britain, they have the parliament. Parliament is similar to our Congress, and they have an upper house and a lower house as well. Their upper house is called the House of Lords. Their lower house is called the House of Commons. So the House of Lords, in theory, would be our Senate. The House of Commons would be our House of Representatives. Going down the list, the second reason we chose bicameralism was conflict resolution. We talked way back in Unit 1, if you remember, about the Connecticut Compromise. You had these 2 theories of thought. You had New Jersey, who wanted representation based on population, or I'm sorry, New Jersey, who wanted representation that was equal across the board, and then Virginia, who wanted representation based on population size. So arguing back and forth as we're creating this Constitution, we decide to compromise. That's why we call it the Connecticut Compromise, and we create a 2-house format where we can have both representation that's equal as well as representation that's based on the population. So conflict was resolved very early on in our nation's infancy by creating a bicameral legislature. The third bullet point here, checks and balances. We've talked about checks and balances as far as the 3 branches of government. We know that the executive branch can check the legislative branch can check the judicial, and so on and so forth. Each branch has their own check powers over the other 2. Now, by creating a bicameral legislature, you actually create a check and balance within the legislative branch. The Senate cannot perform an action such as passing a bill without House approval. And likewise, the House cannot perform an action without Senate approval. So the two sides of the legislative branch, in theory, allow for checks and balances to occur within the legislative branch. So if we look at our Congress, for example, today, we have a Senate that is majority Republican. We have a House that is majority Democratic. So the Democrats are able to check the Republicans, as well as the Republicans able to check the Democrats, which ensures that no one party becomes all too powerful within the legislative branch. Now, that check and balance falls to the wayside if one party were to, say, hold the majority in both the Senate and the House. And we've seen that throughout history. At the end of the Obama presidency, the Senate and the House were both controlled by Republicans, which did not allow for much Democrat legislation to get through. Now, that happens, like I said, throughout history, but that is usually cleaned up throughout midterm elections that happen halfway through a presidency. Now, if we move on and we talk about congressional districting, I'm going to kind of breeze over this because we did talk about a lot of this in the worksheet in the earlier video. So we know that we have 435 congressional districts. Those 435 districts are passed out by the Census Bureau in every 0 year. So we're in the middle of a census right now in the year 2020. The Census Bureau will collect their data and they will redistribute the 435 districts as they see fit. Now, I've got the apportionment right here for 2010, and you can see the states that gained several representatives and the states that lost representatives. Texas, for example, saw a huge increase in representation, +4. Much of their representation, if you remember from an earlier video that we watched, came from Louisiana, which you can kind of only barely see here. Let me see if I can get rid of this. There you go. Came from Louisiana because Louisiana, if you remember, lost representation due to Hurricane Katrina. Hurricane Katrina rolls through in 2006. Much of the New Orleans area disperses, and Texas picks up quite a bit of representation as a result of that. Michigan, our state, we see lost one representative. You got to go back to 2008. 2008, we're in the middle of the financial crisis. We're having issues with the automotive industry. A lot of our population disperses as well. A lot of them head out west, where you can see there was gain, and we lose one representative. So we went from 15 representatives down to, this is our current congressional district setup of 14 representatives. We have 14 districts today. The 435 districts each receive a single representative. So we have single member districts across all 50 states. That one representative is responsible for the members of its district. The members of its district, remember from the worksheet, are called constituents. So if we look at the map over here of Michigan, we have District 1 is the entire upper part of the Lower Peninsula and then the entire Upper Peninsula. It's a huge chunk of territory, but we know population-wise, there's not a ton of people that live up there. So we have one representative who's responsible for the constituents of basically everything north of, let's call it Traverse City without looking at the map too closely because I can't read the words, and the entire Upper Peninsula. Now, for those of you that live in the Novi area, you guys would be part of District 11 over here, which you can barely see because the territory is so small because the population gets so dense as we move closer and closer to Metro Detroit. You guys would be the constituents of District 11. People that live out in Livingston County, like I do, District 8, this little yellow area right here, we're part of District 8. Our representative is Alicia Slotkin, and we are her constituents. Reapportionment, if we go down to bullet point B here, happens as a result of the census, so only every 10 years. The districts themselves, if we go down to this final bullet point, are drawn in most cases by state legislatures, and we're going to talk about that. So the actual members of the state government, including the members of the House, including the members of the Senate, they are responsible for drawing these districts every 10 years. So as population shifts, these districts will move about. Some will get larger, some will get smaller, depending on population movement. We'll talk about why that can be an issue in our next video. We'll talk about gerrymandering. So coming up, the next time we get together, we'll talk about gerrymandering. For today, I just wanted to cover congressional districts and bicameralism. A lot of this is a repeat and refresher of what we went over on the worksheet in the earlier video. So you guys take care. Follow up with the assignment that's posted under the assignments tab on MyCC. And I will see you guys in our next class.